Okay. Good afternoon, Professor Fiori. As you have read my email, I'm Eun-Jeung Lee, PhD student at the Institute of Korean Study at Freie Universität of Berlin. It's a great pleasure to finally meet you, and thank you very much for taking the time to join this interview today. And before we begin, let me briefly mention a few administrative things. This interview is part of the research project organized by the Korean European Center at FU and funded by the Korean Development Institute, KDI, in South Korea. So as the part of this project, we are conducting a series of expert interviews with scholars across the Europe. And this interview will be recorded, and with your permission, perhaps, and this may be shared on the Korea European Center's official YouTube channel. And we will also send you the necessary administrative documents related to the honorarium, and sometimes next week. So now I'd like to briefly introduce the background of our research. In the past few years, our team has mainly conducted quantitative study on how Korea is perceived across the different European countries. However, this year we decided to shift toward the qualitative approach, focusing on in-depth interviews with leading experts in Europe. And we wanted to go beyond the statistical trend to better understand the narratives, experiences, and meanings that shape how Korea is represented and understood in various culture and political contexts. So our current theme focuses on public perceptions of Korea in Europe, especially how these perceptions have evolved over the time in relation to Korea's cultural presence, political development, and academic representation. In that sense, we are truly honored to speak with you, Professor Fiori, today as an expert on East Asian politics and institution, as someone who have previously contributed to our earlier quantitative research. So I'm very excited to hear about how you first became interested in studying Korea and how you have seen the image of Korea changes and within Italian society over the years. Before we move on the main questions, I'd like to begin with something more personal, your own academic journey. Could you tell us, the audience, a little bit about how you first became interested in studying about particularly Korea?
Yes. Thank you very much, first of all, for having me. It's a privilege, actually, to take part in this survey. I'm very interested in, because actually, due to the survey, we come to know about what people in Europe think of Korea. And so actually for all of us, this survey is pretty valuable. Now, I studied in Naples. Actually, in Naples, they have the most ancient school in Asian studies in Europe. And so actually I decided that I wanted to study about Asia. That basically means, Asian culture and Asian history at that time, mainly. What I did was basically taking classes in Asian history and culture, and on top of that, actually, I tried to specialize myself in Asian languages. So at that time, when I was much younger than now, I decided to study Japanese. That was my major when I was at the university, when I was studying at the university, and then actually I took Korean as a minor. And I really liked both of them. From a linguistic point of view, they were particularly attractive. But then actually, towards the end of my career, before graduating, actually, I discovered an institution that is called Korea Foundation. And that was a turning point in my life, because actually I applied for a scholarship and I was given the scholarship. And so basically, soon after I graduated, I left for Korea for the first time, and I ended up studying Korean language at Yonsei University. Of course, it goes without saying that actually that was pretty much important, because I started to know Korea better. And actually, it was pretty much important for me because I was, kind of really influenced by the country, by its culture, by the people. And I really actually fell in love with the country and the Korean population. It was actually probably, I always like to think that I was in the right place at the right time. Now, when it comes to what actually I have been doing for more than 2 decades now, that is actually studying Korean politics, focusing on inter-Korean relations, trying to actually study North Korea as well from the political point of view. I'm not really interested in the North Korean nuclear arsenal, for example. I leave that topics to some other scholars. What I'm really interested in is the regime and how the regime thinks, and what kind of relations actually exist between South Korea and North Korea. But when it comes to that, my turning point was actually 1997. So I was in Korea, and I was living with Korean people, and actually what happened one night was that these Korean friends brought me to a meeting, a public meeting with the presidential candidate at that time, who was Kim Dae-jung. And actually, by seeing and hearing the words of Kim Dae-jung, I actually was so impressed that actually I decided that I needed to study more to actually delve into Korean politics. And that has become, basically a kind of, a turning point, a watershed in my career. I was really impressed by President Kim, and actually by his vision. So eventually I really was fascinated by the Sunshine Policy and by this kind of policy of re-engagement. And I tried to actually know more about what Kim Dae-jung was eventually passing as a message. And that was the moment when my career and my life actually changed, because, that was the beginning of everything. So basically, up to this moment, I have been always studying inter-Korean relations again, and from a certain point of view, as a scholar, I do think that actually, there is the necessity to understand the counterpart and eventually work in a certain direction that is actually the direction of, basically establishing a peaceful environment on the Korean Peninsula. So I was pretty much, impressed by President Kim. And that was the beginning. And so I've never left Korea. I always actually, I go to Korea every single summer, because actually I teach at Korea University International Summer Campus. And so, likely, I always have the possibility to go and visit the country on a permanent basis, basically. So that's actually the story.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. It's always interesting and inspiring to hear how personal curiosity, also like the institutional chance turns into the long-term academic path. And like building on that, I'm curious that given your long-term experience observing Korea, also about teaching about Korea also in Italy. And I'd like to hear about your perspective on how the general public in Italy perceived Korea. Probably it has changed since you late 1990s. You maybe like come back or like back and forth, but like, and you could see how Korea's image has changed in Italy as well. Like, how could you describe about the general public's perception Korea in Italy has changed?
Sure, and this is a brilliant question, actually. Now, first of all, if I have to compare to what extent actually Italians know about Korea now and let's say more than 25 years ago, what I can tell you is that, of course, nowadays Italians know more about Korea. And when it comes to student, actually, of course, we can divide, when I talk about Italians, actually, we can divide them into two groups, okay? If we actually talk about students, of course, actually, they are pretty much, knowledgeable about Korea. When it comes to, the Italian public in general, actually, they are less aware of what Korea is. But if compared to, let's say, 25 years ago or more than 25 years ago, Korea has become more important. And, Italians know more about the country. Is it actually, does this mean that actually Koreans have a clear perception of what Korea is? My answer is no. My answer is no, because actually I still think that, Italians know less about Korea than many other people in other European countries. Actually, for example, just to make you an example, whenever I, talk with people and, I tell them that, I actually do research on Korea, the first thing, 90% of the time, the first question I'm asked is North Korea or South Korea. And this means that basically they don't have, any clear idea that basically you can't go to North Korea. You can't have any access to North Korea. So basically, that kind of question should not be asked, because it goes without saying that, I go to South Korea, I study the Korean Peninsula from South Korea. Otherwise, actually, it's pretty much impossible to do, in any other ways. And actually, what has contributed, let's say, in the last maybe 10, 15 years, or maybe less than that, but actually what has contributed to make Korea more, renowned, more actually, renowned in Italy is, the Hallyu, of course. So basically, we're talking about cultural aspects. Korean movies, Korean music, Korean dramas, whatever, actually, have become pretty much attractive. And so, of course, actually, many Italians have gradually understood how important, from a cultural point of view, this country is. And this is good. This is very good, actually. But it goes without saying that from many other perspectives, Italians are still pretty much ignorant about Korea. That basically means, if you go to a shopping mall and you ask about whatever, Samsung, for example, you need to buy a fridge, and actually you want to go for Samsung. It's not unusual to be asked, why actually you want to buy a Japanese fridge. That is actually in the minds of average Italians. Actually, they always tend to mix actually Koreans with Chinese, with Japanese, and I'm not talking about the people, of course. I'm talking about products, goods, items. So this is more or less the story. Not to talk about, actually, I do live in Bologna, and in Bologna there's this big Chinese community, and so in the eyes of people from Bologna, actually, basically this is quite insulting, but actually they tend to think that Asians are all the same, and basically they never understand that, of course, actually, Chinese have a different history, different traditions, different, a different culture. So you can't compare Chinese with Japanese with Korean. So actually, basically it's more or less like these. But again, actually, the cultural production has helped, Korea to be recognized. And in my opinion, this was actually pretty much important. Of course, everybody knows that the Korean government, helped the cultural industry to become, more, how to say, attractive and famous in foreign countries. And, I basically tend to believe that what the government did at that time, and different administrations actually have been doing, since, was a good policy to make Korea more, how to say, attractive in a sense.
Then probably, in your opinion, how do I say, like the globalization of Korean culture project by the Korean regimes have affected quite much to the European context or perception of the Europeans on Korea. And but like it is true that like we cannot actually generalize the public's perception. Also, like maybe even though like you encounter daily basis of the students who studying Korean studies and is like very distinguished population. And but still, was there any particular event or moment when you notice a bit of like a visible change in how Korea is perceived in Italy? For example, like there was a moment 2002 Italy, like maybe the 2002 like the World Cup. There was a moment, and also like something else, maybe like 2012, like South Korean pop culture, like Gangnam Style, or any kind of a particular cultural event or political event you could remember? Anything happened in Italy as well?
I don't think I can remember or eventually, highlight the importance of a single event. But let me tell you a couple of things. Actually, if you do refer to the World Cup 2002, that was a dramatic, tragic moment. Actually, I was in Korea, and actually I was happy that Korea actually passed. But of course, what I can tell you is that, at that time, Korea was pretty much, widely hated by all Italians. So that was not a very good moment, actually. But seriously speaking, let me tell you a couple of things, because actually, I think this is pretty much important. You know that, I'm going to tell you that eventually there are two institutions representing Korea in Italy, okay? We do have the embassy in Rome, and then we have the consulate, the general consulate in Milan. And, Bologna is part of Emilia-Romagna, so actually it's covered by the consulate. And so actually I do have very intimate relations with the consulate general in Milan. And, I really love them. I'm proud actually of being a friend of the consulate, because they are kind of a brilliant people, and we always try to work together. And actually we have jointly organized different cultural events co-sponsored by us and by the consulate, or eventually, sponsored by us, and then the consulate actually joined us in the event. And actually, what I can tell you is that in many of these events, actually, the public, the general public, I'm not talking about students, I'm not talking about, specific people who are interested in Asia, but I'm talking about general public actually participated. And so, for example, actually, we did have, when was that? A couple of years ago, we actually organized this beautiful event with, this performance, actually, all, junior musicians, actually, coming from Korea and playing traditional Korean instruments and dancing, actually, performing traditional dances. And that was crazy. I mean, the hall was full of people. And, for many of them, for the large majority, actually, it was the first time, that basically they could see, such an event. And on top of that, actually, nowadays, as you do know very well, you are very young, so actually you do know it. Youngsters are not really into, traditional music or traditional performance or, these kind of things. But actually, I organized that event, and I could talk to people, and all of them were kind of really impressed by how beautiful the performance was. And that was kind of, it made me understand that basically, again, culture is a way actually to influence other people. I mean, if we want to call it in a very theoretical way, actually, we could use the expression soft power, right? Mm-hmm. Which is, something that Joseph Nye eventually worked on. And so South Korea's soft power is becoming kind of really, really important in order to actually project the the image of Korea, and eventually reinforce the idea of Korea in foreign countries. So that specific event was pretty important. Now, the other thing, if I have a couple of minutes, the other thing I would like to stress is that, when I talk to my students at the very beginning of one of my courses, actually, in order to make them understand how, the political situation of the northeastern part of Asia developed, actually, I tend to talk about, what Japan was and what Japan did at certain point in history. And of course, actually, I do talk about, the colonial experience of Korea, right? And actually, if I had to compare what happened, 15 years ago and what is happening now, is actually the fact that many students nowadays actually are pretty much aware of, the comfort women issue, for example. 15 years ago, actually, I showed these pictures of, former comfort women, or actually the bench that actually was eventually positioned in front of the Japanese embassy in Tono, but nobody really understood actually what I was displaying. Okay, nowadays actually many students, whenever actually I use those slides, are aware of what I'm referring to. So this means, and this is not a cultural, a specific cultural message, actually. You need to know history to actually be aware of what, the comfort women issue was, and, how important actually it has always been in the relations between Korea and Japan. So this is, again, a sign of the fact that many young people are now becoming interested in Korea. And, I have actually students coming from, many countries in Europe. So this is kind of really important.
That was a really insightful overview, especially like I was kind of impressed in the general public who take part in this cultural event organized by like Korean diplomat. And I was wondering also like if these people are actually already known of Korea a bit of, or just like generally, there is like traditional Korean cultural event and I want to just take part in. And this is one question I was wondering. And also like with regard to the students, you're like giving a lecture, and also they need to actually, they might be interested in Korea already before like entering to your courses, but how could they already well informed of Korea and through the what kind of media, and maybe there might be also chance to Italian media like spread about Korean history or political event also, like because we have not dealt with much about the Italian media or the newspapers and so on.
Very interesting questions, actually. Now, the first one is easy. In that specific event actually was advertised by us. So we do have a newsletter, and actually we do use the newsletter to, basically make people know about, all the events we organize. And for whatever reason, actually, the response was massive. So, these huge crowd of people actually showed up, and many of them, for many of them, actually, that was the first time they participated into, this kind of specific event performed by a Korean opera. Okay, so actually, they had no clue whatsoever. I mean, it was the first time for them. So actually, I really liked the fact that they liked the performance. I mean, I was kind of really, really satisfied. And the consul general actually was pretty much satisfied. The second question is more difficult, actually, I have to say. So first of all, when I talk, as I said, when I talk about my students, I am referring to students coming from different countries in Europe. So actually, but if we eventually, focus on Italian students and their previous knowledge of Korea, actually, again, cultural products become pretty important, because nowadays, actually, it's not unusual to find whatever Korean films, for example, being displayed in by the Italian television. So actually, it's pretty usual. Or eventually, whenever something happens in Korea, and of course, I'm now mentioning both of them. Okay, South Korea or North Korea, I do always receive invitations to participate in radio broadcasting and, at the national level. So this means that, eventually I can reach, basically everybody in Italy. And, people, actually scholars, being, interested in Korea are becoming, are growing. So actually, I'm not the only one. I'm probably the oldest, unfortunately, but actually, young cohorts, young scholars, and many of them are pretty much talented, are basically focusing on Korea as well. So I really hope in the near future, actually, research on Korea will be amplified in Italy. But then again, I'm always repeating myself, regretfully, but actually, Parasite, for example, has been a huge success in Italy, a huge success. let me tell you a couple of things about Parasite. The first thing is that actually, and to make you understand why people know more about Korea, the first thing about Parasite is that actually it's a beautiful film. It's an amazing movie. So actually, it was like you see Parasite, and you can see Parasite actually without knowing Korea well. Okay, it's kind of beautiful movie. Point two, it deals with many societal issues that actually make people know more about Korea. Okay, so by watching Parasite, actually, they do learn more about Korea, and many Italians actually, after having watched Parasite, actually came to me saying, "Is this the way? Is that the way? Is this true about Korea? Is that like Korea is? These kind of things." And I gave several interviews on Parasite at the national level. So actually, that was hugely important. Point three. This may seem kind of really stupid, but let me tell it. I mean, let me tell this nice short story. That is, at a certain point, actually, Parasite. In Parasite, actually, you can hear. You can listen to an Italian song, which is actually Gianni Morandi's song. So Gianni Morandi is this old guy. He's 80 nowadays. He's from a place very close to Bologna. And, actually, for whatever reason, Bon Joon-ho actually decided to use, one of his songs, only kind of 25 seconds, but actually that was pretty much attractive for for Italian watchers. I mean, why this guy? And after actually he was rewarded. Globally rewarded. Actually, Italians, more and more Italians became kind of interested in Parasite, also because actually he was using Italian music. So I mean, all these kind of, and then Squid Game, for example. I mean, that is huge. I mean, I really liked the first edition. I didn't really like the other two, but the first one was crazy. It's a huge. It's a an outstanding idea. It was striking.
Yes.
And
yes.
many in Italy actually liked it. And so this, basically tells you that, again, culture is basically, how to say, bringing, with it all, all the consequences. That is actually making people more interested in, Korea, knowing more about this country.
Like kind of like by preparing this interview, like I was just asked to also like talk about politics and political aspect recently has happened in South Korea, for example. But like especially like Professor Fiori, you said like honestly telling me about this anecdotes, more actually cultural events have influenced much strongly compared to like political or North Korea and South Korea, like the relationship issues, because we are talking about general publics instead of like the who study about like actual Korean studies. And but although I have to may ask a question about, because we prepared, and how have recent political changes in South Korea also is very important as a Korean audiences, maybe like how do you think recent political development in South Korea, such as the impeachment, leadership changes, and democratic movement have affected Italy's public maybe view of Korea? Maybe they know about these issues as well?
Now, this can be very long actually as an answer, very long. But if we do have time, the first thing I need to say is that actually Italians know very little about Korean politics. Okay, and when it comes to Asia in general, actually Italians are very biased. and possibly, they have this biased vision of Asian politics because of China. So as I said, when you tend to mix everything, something, everybody knows in Italy, as in Europe, is basically the fact that China is a non-democratic country, right? So basically, whenever they think of Asia, they basically think that all Asian countries, are not democratic countries, okay? So this is kind of general assumption. Now let me turn to December the 3rd. So what happens is that actually I land in Incheon on December the 3rd in the afternoon, and then, at night, everything happens, okay? So actually, I went back to the hotel. I didn't have any connection. My mobile actually was not working. So I went back to my hotel, and actually I was using the hotel Wi-Fi, and basically I discovered that everybody had called me from Italy. So, I'm basically referring to journalists, okay? And of course, that night I didn't sleep a wink because, of course, actually I had to give comments on what was happening in Korea. And everybody actually wanted to know more about Korea. Now, something that actually is kind of really peculiar when it comes to Italian journalism, or possibly European journalism, is basically the fact that actually we do like to look at foreign policy by exaggerating what is happening in other countries, right? So whenever actually there's a peak of tension between South Korea and North Korea, basically, our newspapers talk about, war is going to happen in Korea, right? And so on December the 3rd, actually, they started, to use these kind of 9 columns titles, like, martial law in Korea, we do not know where the country is heading to, these kind of things, pretty much exaggerated. I actually gave dozens of interviews, and believe me, actually, it was a very, very difficult moment for me. It was a difficult moment for me because actually I have always actually used the Korean example, right? With my students, with the general audience, with people, by saying, look at Korea. Very recent democracy, but, actually full-fledged democratized country. And then actually, everything happens on December the 3rd. And, I was kind of shameful. I mean, I it was bad for me actually to talk about what was happening. And, I must say actually the image that was projected of the country that night was very negative, was very, very negative. So that nowadays actually I do think that one of the responsibilities President Eun-Jeung has is to rebuild the international image of Korea. But what happens was that, the Italian media looked at Korea in a very negative way. Very negative way. Meaning that actually they started to comment on what had happened in Korea by eventually saying that Korea had renounced to democracy. So, what is important to stress here is basically the fact that everybody was pretty much interested in the proclamation of martial law. Nobody was pretty much interested in what happened afterwards. But actually, of course, actually, I commented on, President Yoon's impeachment, for example. But, Italian media were not very interested in that. Because it's too difficult to explain, the political priorities of a different country to the Italian audience, because as we were saying at the very beginning, actually, they are not really familiar with Korea. So this is what happened. But let me tell you, 20 seconds. Actually, as soon as I came back to Italy from Korea, all my students, they knew I was in Korea, and all my students actually wanted me to give extra classes to actually give comments on what had happened in Korea. And so basically we spent few hours talking about that, and of course actually I asked them what they had understood about the whole story, and so to give me feedbacks, to give me actually their impressions, and that was pretty valuable for me, because sometimes I'm too, how to say, I'm too too deeply into Korean politics to actually be kind of a bit detached and read actually what happens from a neutral point of view. So actually, I do need people, I need to talk to in order to actually understand what others think of, Korean politics and, political events in general.
That was very interesting. Still, like, because when there was like this censure or like eventful event in South Korea has happened, the Italian media have like highlighted like certain point of negative and like sensationalizing the event, and afterward like what we have recovered in South Korea, but like nobody pay attention to the afterwards. And the problem is then like as you described, like we have maybe South Korea have now a bit of a like bad image in Italian context. Then like from your perspective, what are the main challenge or like what kind of opportunity for the South Korea's image in Italy we can develop in the near future?
Well, this is a difficult question, actually. I don't know, but this is actually something that the new government should take into account. So if we do put everything aside, that basically means if we do not consider cultural aspects or whatever, and we are mainly focusing on political aspects, actually, what I really think is that again, the current government should try to find ways to strengthen its democratic image, because this is pretty much interesting. Okay, now there is something that I think is pretty much important when it comes to Europe, when it comes to Italy in particular, because that traditionally Italy has always been a very good ally of the United States, right? So actually, what we tend to believe is that those who are allies of the U.S. are part of our big family. Okay. So nowadays, actually, there's a problem with Korea. The problem with Korea is that basically, Korea, from the security point of view, actually, is under, let's say, the American umbrella, right? So actually, it still has this kind of very, very deep alliance with Washington. But from the economic point of view, actually, since 2004, I mean, Korea has become pretty much dependent economically on the People's Republic of China. And, in general, actually, this kind of condition is not really well seen, well considered by Europeans and Italians in particular. Actually, we do have economic relations with China, but actually we don't want to be considered as being kind of dependent on China because, of course, because of values, because of, standards, because of norms, because of, these kind of things, actually. So what I actually tend to believe is that Korea needs to be perceived as, again, this country who has this kind of deep belief in democratic norms and values. Because this is kind of really important to, actually, again, make people understand that Korea is part of this big family, big democratic family.
So maybe like we are going to almost the end of this interview, but like last few questions we have, maybe like maybe like more towards the future perspective. How could we like develop academic or cultural cooperation between Korea and Italy? Can be like further strengthened, as you described a lot of events, and also your students are more interested in like even contemporary politics and history as well. Like, how could we do that?
I have a clearer idea, or I think actually, I suppose I have a clearer idea on these. And these can be seen from both perspectives. Okay. Now, when it comes to Italy and when it comes to my university, the university I work for, which is the university I know better, actually, we do have a number of agreements with Korean universities. Okay, over the years, actually, we have signed agreements with many institutions: Korea University, Yonsei University, Songyungwan University, Sogang University, Ide. So actually, we do have a large variety of universities. Actually, we have signed agreements with. And our students actually go to Korea. We do have exchange programs, and our students actually go to Korea. And some of them, are pretty much interested in Korea. And whenever they come back to Italy, actually, they want to write their final dissertation on Korea under my supervision. So actually, Korea at a certain point becomes an important part, of their academic life. Okay, so the point, and again, actually, this is something I have extensively reflected on without finding a solution, is that basically Koreans are not, interested in coming to Italy to study. There are a couple of problems here. The first one is that, if we talk about singers, for example, or musicians, they come to Italy because actually, Italian conservatories are pretty good, right? So for them, actually, it's a good choice to come to Italy. But if we talk about, students studying whatever discipline, political science, sociology, engineering, mechanics, whatever, actually, they tend to believe that Italy is not the right place where to go, which is probably, they still are mentally trapped into this kind of academic dependence on the United States. That is, it's actually, I need to go to the US if I really want to become very good in what I am doing. Okay. And, despite the fact that actually I have to pay whatever, $60,000 per year, the US is the place I need to go. Which is actually, it's something I can't really understand, because as you know very well, we do have, kind of amazing universities in Europe. I'm not talking about my university. I'm talking about, German universities, French universities. Universities in Spain are very good. So actually, why Korean students do not really take Europe into consideration? I have never understood that. I can't really understand why actually they are so biased when it comes to education in Europe, which is actually a very good education. So I can't really understand. But when it comes to that, and when it comes to actually what you were asking me, we should probably try to promote more mutual exchanges, because actually, luckily for us, we do have institutions like the Korea Foundation or the Academy of Korean Studies. So basically, I will always be, kind of devoted to the Korea Foundation, because the Korea Foundation has given me everything. Since I was a child, actually, the Korea Foundation has given me everything. So I'm always indebted to the Korea Foundation. We do not have foundations like that in Italy, supporting students and then scholars and then, those who are interested in a certain country. But actually, we should do more, and possibly, I'm not saying this is, this is a responsibility of Korea. I'm not saying that. It's also, the fact that basically, possibly Italy is so attractive that actually we need to deal with people coming from, too many countries who actually want to study in Italy. But when it comes to me, actually, somebody, whose expertise is on Korea, actually, I mean, I would like to have more students from Korea, actually, studying here in Italy. That's actually my vision.
Yeah. When it comes to about like Korean students like migrating to the other like academic careers in other countries, especially Western countries, is very highly focused on, as you described, like the US.
Right.
And then like interestingly, like among the European countries now, the Germany has received much more students from South Korea, because Korean students who have graduated university or already in Korea and then like start to work, and then they kind of like quit the job and they want to find a better life quality in European context. For example, like we have an image in Europe and Northern European part, they have a better working and like life balances. And then like they discover Germany is quite lucrative to study because it's almost free. You study in,
Totally.
and even you can study in English, like many various university provide like master programs in English. And then it's very attractive for Koreans who can speak like internationally experienced and go to the European country. It's one of the biggest country in Europe is Germany, and then like free education and like cost of living and quality wise is quite infrastructure wise also very like safe in Germany to live, and like less discriminative attitude in German society. Somehow they have this image, and we in Germany now receive much more students, and now among the EU countries, Germany has the most Korean population at this moment. So this is like just my information. And maybe the last question is there anything else you would like to add that like you feel is important for understanding how Italy perceives Korea today? Anything else?
Anything else? No, I don't think so. Actually, I already talked too much. Whatever. No, I really. Maybe I can close by saying that actually, we do have. Again, actually, I'd like to give these, strong message that is actually we do have very good representatives here. And so actually what the consulate and what the embassy are constantly doing is, trying to make Italian people know more about Korea. And so actually what, diplomats, Korean diplomats actually do here in Italy is pretty important and valuable. I don't work too much with the embassy, but actually, we do always have very good ambassadors. And again, going around the peninsula and try to actually make people know more about Korea. I can definitely talk about the the consulate in Milan, and actually, we are lucky because we always have very good consuls general, and actually we work with them, and this is important actually. If you do have a good representative, of your country being, actually acting as a diplomat, of course, that is pretty important. That is the image of your country, the projected image of your country. So it's kind of really, really, really important. So nothing else. I think that actually, what is important, very last, actually, what is very important, and actually this should have been, I should have talked about this earlier, but what is important nowadays, and again, probably this is, a consequence of the cultural strength of Korea, but what has happened in the last, let's say, 5 years is that actually the number of students who are taking classes in Korean language has basically overcome those who are studying Japanese, which is huge. It's huge. It was not like that 20 years ago. When I started in Naples, actually, of course, basically everybody wanted to learn Japanese, and there were only few people who wanted actually to study Korean. Nowadays, actually, the situation has completely changed. And again, this is basically pretty much important because it makes you understand how many people, have become pretty interested in Korean studies and Korean language and whatever, actually. So this is kind of really, really important. And I'm not talking about my university. I'm talking about all universities in Italy. They, basically, all of them actually have had this kind of explosion in, in Korean studies.
When it comes to language courses in Korean, and you mentioned about just language courses or Korean studies like department or major?
We do not, this is kind of really peculiar actually. We do not have Korean studies departments. We do not, there's no Italian university which actually has a Korean studies department. So there are a couple of universities, mainly La Sapienza in Rome. So basically they have a department of Asian studies, I think, where, Korean is kind of really, really attractive. So actually they can study language, they can study some history, they can study, something related to Korea. And that's, one of the most mature programs we do have in Italy. Then we have the University of Naples, where, basically they teach Korean language. And, basically they have a huge number of students taking Korean language classes. Then you have Venice. And the University of Venice, Ca' Foscari, is focused on Asian studies. And again, you can study you can study Korean language there very extensively. And then, of course, actually, you can study something about Korean history. But then, when it comes to my university, for example, we do not have. I work for the Department of Political and Social Sciences. So basically, I tend to actually teach about Korea, but we do not have a Department of Korean Studies or anything that eventually can be called Korean Studies. When I teach, actually, I basically, my course, or one of my courses, is actually titled International Relations of East Asia. So, of course, actually, I need to talk about Korea, but actually, I also need to talk about China's foreign policy, Japanese foreign policy, and, relations among these countries. So it's like, Korea becomes part of, a more how to say, a more global kind of political vision of Asia. But I'd like, actually, this is but if I could choose, actually, I would only talk about Korea, but of course.
Okay, yeah, probably like time is almost wrap up, and then like we have to finish our interview. Maybe we have more time to talk about like Korea in Italy and further time. And thank you so much, Professor Fiori.
Thanks a lot.
This has been a truly interesting and insightful conversation, and your perspective will be invaluable our research. Thank you so much.